committee members and students, welcome to our library. We are very pleased to have you today in order to listen to our Associate Professor Efe Tokdemir for lunchtime lecture of this academic year. But first, let me introduce Efe Hocam first, and then I will leave the space for him to give his lecture. Efe Tokdemir is from international relations, as you know, and he is a successful academic for our university. We are very proud of him. And he also contributed to our World Authors of Bilkent collection of the library. His book is here, and you can refer to his book if you are interested in this subject. In order to mention his success, I have to read them because he has many successful awards, and his career is a successful one. He distinguished with many awards, including the Young Scientist Award from Science Academy of Turkey in 2019, and also he has the Outstanding Young Scientist Award from the Turkish Academy of Sciences, dated back to 2020. And also he has Sakıp Sabancı International Research Award in 2021. And also he received the TÜBİTAK Incentive Award in 2023. And also he has the International Relations Council of Turkey Young Scholars Award in 2024. And also he has the TÜBİTAK National Young Leader Researchers Program Award for the years 2022 and 2025. And also recently he has the European Research Council's Consolidator Grant Project for the years 2026 till 2031. We are very proud to listen to him today here. And Efe Hocam, please come. Thank you very much for accepting our offer.
Well, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm not young anymore, as you could understand from the CV. I'm consolidating these days. Thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here in front of you, in front of the familiar faces. Normally, we have these long travels before presenting our work to the foreign audiences, but I'm glad I have a chance to present my work here in front of you. This is why instead of preparing a standalone article, in a format, workshopping the article, I prepared this lecture in such a way that I could actually somehow summarize my scholarship so far, how this scholarship built, and contributed to the literature in general, and how these things motivated me for the further step, which constitutes my current research agenda, including this grants that I will be starting soon. So. Let me start with the very major questions I'm tackling with these days. Then let's take a step back, and I can briefly summarize you what kind of a theoretical pillars I try to build upon and follow through the days. So these days, I'm trying to respond to these two questions. How do governments respond to radicalization, insurgency, and terrorism as a strategic way by targeting the constituency relations specifically? And how do people respond to these strategies employed by not only terrorist groups, actually, but non-state armed actors general and governments? I have three objectives in delving into this research. First of all, I would like to shift from this separate dyadic approaches examining government, non-state armed actor relations or non-state armed actor constituency relations, but establish a triadic framework accounting for all these interactions, analyzing the outcomes of these both attractive and repressive measures employed by governments to sever the ties between constituency and armed group. I will come to that point. And lastly, I would like to explore the causal mechanism behind this right policy, wrong outcome type of a dilemma. And through these, my main contributions will be incorporating this non-violent aspect of violence. In my research area, peace and conflict studies, you may think that we are so focused on the violence, and actually we are, but I would like to delve more into this non-violent aspects by relaxing homogeneous audience assumptions, saying that there are different audiences that we should care about, and engaging in this dynamic modeling, incorporating strategic decision-making by the actors. But first of all, I mean, given the audience, maybe I can briefly talk about why I'm specifically focusing on non-state armed actors. This is a depiction of the conflict scene in the world starting from 1946. And as you can see, these two groups are coming from internationalized or non-internationalized but intrastate conflicts. The wars, most of the time you may think that IR scholars are more focused on the wars themselves. Wars are actually a very small component of this conflict. Yes, they might be they might be more dramatic, but we are constantly experiencing intrastate conflicts where non-state armed actors taking part of it. And in my book, actually, 5 years ago, along with my co-author, I tried to come up with a triadic framework to understand how these interactions are ongoing, especially if we are not only talking about the violent aspects. So this part, you can all easily think about, I mean, the non-state armed actors challenging the government's monopoly and legitimacy, engaging in some kind of a violent action against the government responding to this. We name them differently: counterterrorism, armed conflict, counterinsurgency, other things. But also, there are citizens, these non-state armed actors are strategically engaging to gain some legitimacy, because in a way, this is competition between non-state armed actors and governments to win their allegiance. And in return, we observe that non-state armed actors are engaging in some rebel governance strategies. I have also contributed to this literature largely. While I was doing this, one presumption we did was that after all, these non-state armed actors are violent organizations. This organization part is important because, as all organizations who would like to achieve their goals, they need manpower, they need capital, and they need market demand. So when we start counting them as organizations, then the whole story is becoming more and more tricky in terms of understanding this non-violent aspects of the issues. So if there are organizations and if they would like to achieve their goals, they need to survive. In order to survive, they need these items. So they engage in some kind of either destructive or constructive actions in relation to their constituency. Here, the constituency can be defined as the group of people whose support is asked and needed by the armed group. And we know that they might engage in high operational costs, like, public services, maybe building hospitals, offering judicial services to their constituents. But these returns are high, definitely. And low operational costs, like, recruiting children, engaging in extortion or revolutionary taxes. These kinds of things are low return actions. But after all, high returns actions are risky. So they would like to secure high returns if possible, but go with the less costly investments if necessary, because every single group cannot take the risk of engaging in these risky activities. Well, this is from my data set covering 1980 to 2011, all these domestic terror groups, non-state armed actors who also engage in terrorism as a strategy at some point in their lifespan. As you can see, these lines are depicting either the destructive deeds or constructive deeds. Over time, we observe, especially after the Cold War, that these strategies, either in a destructive or constructive way, engaging with the constituency, are increasing dramatically. We can come to through the end later on, what's happening, because then the lines are also differing from each other. But when you examine the groups, here, this axis about the constructive actions, this axis about the destructive actions, you observe that many groups are engaging in both types of strategies in their lifespan. So they are acting strategically to decide when to do what exactly in regard to their constituency. And my findings in general, I will not go into the models and or other things, but we indeed find some support regarding this, strategic component as well as the features of groups, in the sense that we observe that ethno-religious groups, groups with territorial control, or groups, operating cross-border, are more likely to engage in constructive actions. Indeed, some group features motivate groups to engage in these actions by determining their, incentive payoffs. Now, let's focus on the government then. How do the governments respond strategically? This table is summarizing us that across more than 600 groups, only 4% of them could be defeated militarily. This is the sticky nature of the non-state armed actors. They survive. It doesn't mean they succeed, but they survive, and they always pose a risk to the security. So military tools are almost many times is not a good option to defeat them. Then let's sit together around the table and make some compromises, accept their conditions. But we know that it is costly somehow. This is from Thatcher back in the 1980s. Britain will not accede to terrorist demands. From President Erdogan, we do not negotiate terrorists. From Spain, it is the mobilization of the Spanish nation in support of its security forces. There is no price to be paid to terrorists. Or this is the Pakistani Prime Minister at the time saying that we're going to reform our tribal areas, address the needs of the people. We will not negotiate with them. Instead, we're going to marginalize them. So this is the third option governments engage in, marginalizing them. How? So remember the theoretical map in the book. Right now in my current projects, that theoretical map transformed into this one. Accordingly, we have the literature about counterterrorism, specifically looking at the interaction between non-state armed actor and government. Another literature, though it's a very underdeveloped literature, accounting the role of citizens and importance of people, individuals in this, but not theorizing about how to engage with these individuals specifically, but taking this as a whole. So a step forward is in the sense that previous literature was specifically focusing on non-state armed actors. Counterinsurgency literature is focusing on holistically. But my project, my recent scholarship, also the naming of the project in that sense, I call it countering via constituency, is specifically focusing on government strategic actions to sever the ties between the constituency within citizens and non-state armed actors. Marginalize them so that these groups could be rendered unnecessary. What are the advantages of this strategy? To begin with, you don't need to bargain with the terrorists. So you can easily avoid the extreme demands of these organizations. You can destroy the justification for political violence, because the moment you sit around the table, well, there are other minority groups, other agreed groups waiting for their round, their seat. So you say that, you know what? Either you have a group or not. It's not a solution. And lastly, the reputation. Reputation is important because once you start compromising the non-state armed actors, others may follow the same path, related to the second point I already made. So this sounds like a very logical strategy. Why not to do that across all conflicts? All governments can engage in this kind of a strategy. The problem is that it's costly. First of all, you need to pay some economic, social, and political cost. You need resources for this. Well, most of the time, just because you don't have them at the beginning, you are aggrieving these groups and they are rebelling against you, right? So it's not easy to have them automatically. And lastly, well, you are actually also marginalizing some groups in domestic politics, especially the mobilizing nationalists, or encouraging some others to make some future demands, threatening government, I mean, with engaging in this violent politics that others once followed. So, yes, this strategy is there, and governments are actually engaging in this strategy, but they must be doing it selectively. Not across the board, not for every single group, not for every single case. So, the questions that I'm tackling then is transforming into what type of strategies governments employ when targeting constituents in dealing with radicalization, insurgency, and terrorism. I mean, what are their features? Which factors best explain when, why, and how frequently such strategies are used? Currently, I'm working on this. Well, as part of this TÜBİTAK grant, my research team and I, we engage in some kind of a manual data collection, which later constitute the basis for the application of my ERC grant. We manually scan more than 1.5 million news articles, determining some kind of a fixed algorithm across the cases. We detected almost 10,000 relevant news articles, and 4,000 of them are actually success cases in the sense that these are reporting some kind of a concession strategy governments offering to the constituents in an attempt to sever the ties between the armed group and constituency. We did it in a 30-year span in more than 70 countries, covering more than 300 non-state armed groups. So it's not like region-specific, time-specific, but it's a large study. And we have also coded the different features of these strategies, like the type of the concession, the initiating actor, coverage, novelty, conditionality, and all these that I will present to you as a descriptive. Still, we are working on the analytical part of the story, but I mean, we have some descriptives to show you. I don't know if you can see the colors properly, probably not. This map is actually depicting the frequency of our data coding, data in the event data set we compiled. Maybe you could, the darker colors means that concessions are, strategic concessions are offered more frequently. Sorry for that. Turkey, India, Philippines, Colombia, Pakistan are among the countries where we observe this regularly, I mean frequent government attempts. So that said, I decided on focusing on these 4 countries as well, and in the project, in the ERC project, our field will be, covering these 4 countries as well. Specifically because, all the conflicts in these 4 countries are actually constituting 15% of all conflict-related casualties in the world. So these are the drivers of the conflict. These are the countries to focus on lately. And, well, maybe an eyeball check would not tell you the story very well, but in many cases between the government and specific armed group, we observe that actually concessions are offered strategically in terms of the timing as well. Some lines are, again, the colors are problematic, I guess. Blue lines are depicting the battle of number of casualties, sorry for that, and red lines are number of concessions. And this is a regional distribution of the concessions. We observe that actually, we have a quite high variation, which actually indicates that this is something to be looked for. What's happening, why we observe this variation, what is the strategic component there. These are gaining more and more importance. And more descriptive stats, this is regarding the initiating actor, who initiated the concessions, whether it could be the head of state or government speakers or local governments or other actors. This is about the demographic coverage and geographic coverage of the concessions, whether they were offered to the specific region or the whole nation, whether they were, targeting a partial constituents or the whole constituents, whether they were novel, whether they were actually uttered previously, or they are tied to a condition like, first the armed group should actually lay down the arms. Are there such conditions? And are there any schedules announced regarding to that? And lastly, the institutionalization status. This is important. I will come to that point. As you can see, in democracies, we observe more and more numbers of concessions. But even in democracies, those concessions are mostly cheap talks, not institutionalized. They are promised, they are talked about, but not institutionalized because they are costly, remember. So then the question is evolving into the next one. What features of these strategies reduce or increase the effectiveness of these efforts? Again, I mean, it's a bit complicated, but let me summarize this graph for you. It is non-institutionalized, cheap talks actually further contribute to the problem. Why I'm saying this in bold? Because, well, in Turkey as well, we are observing these strategies. Currently, the açılım süreci, we can call it, is not the second one, but the fourth one in Turkish history. The previous one was çözüm süreci. And we know that many promises not realized eventually further contribute to the problem, not only from the Turkish case that we experienced, but this is a large data analysis, showing us that indeed, when you engage in non-institutionalized concessions, you are, the likelihood of surviving for these armed groups are increasing. And it's not only because you are further aggrieving some groups, but also you make some other groups to think that you already offered the solution. This is from 2018 data sets from Turkey. The question is belief in improvements in rights of Kurdish citizens in the last 10 years. We are asking everyone, in a national representative survey. And as you can see, Turks in general think that, yes, their rights improved significantly. On the contrary, Kurds believe that, no, it did not improve indeed. So in that sense, two societies are, going to different directions based on this very same process, the çözüm süreci. And this further contributes to the polarization, conflict-related polarization in the society. So let's further examine these competing mechanisms, why this is happening, and what makes people buy these strategies or avoid these strategies. First of all, we know that cost strategies signals government's resolve and commitment. So if people do not observe these costly commitments, it is likely that they will not believe it. And lack of credible commitments actually, again, another line of research endorse these findings. So competing mechanisms. When you engage in a process, something like çözüm süreci, there might be three outcomes. Either you will succeed the process, you will complete the process, you will not complete the process, let's start with this. So the process fails and you create further frustration about it. This is very clear. Or you can actually complete the process successfully and you win the allegiance of the Constituency, rendering this armed group's use of violence unnecessary. This is also very logical. But there's one more option. What if you complete the process and you believe that it was a success case, but you are not taking the credit for this, but credit is transferred to some other groups? This is not something governments want necessarily, because it's a competition for the legitimacy and monopoly of use of violence. And now, with this process, you are actually further legitimizing the armed group. This is a real problem. So, I have conducted some fieldwork in Turkey back in 2018, as well as 2024. Right before going to the sabbatical, actually, I was conducting focus groups online with the citizens in Van, Diyarbakır, and other places, Istanbul. And at the time, the yeni açılım süreci had not started yet. Only 2 months after Bahçeli made this statement and initiated the process. So we have data from that time frame as well. Conducted some elite interviews in Turkey, focus groups, and public opinion and survey experiments in Turkey, Northern Ireland, and Colombia. Northern Ireland and Colombia cases are very lately conducted. And we tried to understand, to respond to these three questions. So, let's look at the depiction in the field. Many retired soldiers or active soldiers are actually defining the initial process Turkey responded to PKK violence was that it's entirely on military means. And we were targeting the organization's leadership as well. So initial reaction of Turkey when the PKK terror appeared was the military means, not the other strategies that I was actually depicting you. But then we observe this transformation of the strategy. They say that, you can win on the ground, but victories will not last if you cannot win the support of people. We realize that, they say. As a commander, quote unquote, we were not only responsible for providing security, but also for increasing the loyalty of people to the state, winning the allegiance. They were trying to do so. In the past, military operations used to be regular, but after 2000s, the state tried to win the support of the people with things like health services and opening schools. Indeed, we observe that Turkish state is engaging its third way. How do they assess the çözüm süreci? This data is coming from 2018 fieldwork. Well, they are saying that it was a strategic calculation of the government. Remember 2018, çözüm süreci ended 2015, and the whole Hendek wars and conflicts and other things started again. So a peak in the conflict. They are saying that it was a strategic, and they Kurds openly demonstrate their frustration coming from the lack of sincerity and reversals, saying that it was just a deception, it was to create their own curse, all that was given is taken back later on. So indeed, if you fail in the process, we observe that it creates further frustration. Who is the credit winner then? Because a process has started, right? And some, in Turkish, kazanımlar had. So what was happening? Who got the credit? Again, these are quotes. If we stop PKK now, the government will immediately stop investments in the region. I'm an Alevite and I have seen no rights given to them. When the opening process failed, the public became uneasy. Showing us that, and there are many more things, but since we have limited time, I didn't bring it. I'm not saying that, of course, the whole nation thinks so, or the whole constituency thinks so. But many give credit to either HDP, the Kurdish political party, or the PKK, saying that, well, it's the PKK terrorism, PKK violence led to this process eventually. And this is a very dangerous conclusion for a state, because the very reason of having a state is the fact that the violence will be monopolized by state institutions and not be shared but with alternatives. So, one last quote. I think the Kurds themselves won their own rights. Nobody gave them anything. The process opened HDP's path by bringing votes. So, if these credits are falsely given credits, it means that it can further radicalize the constituency and legitimize the presence of violent groups. A recent experiment from Turkey, this time it's 2025. I will not go into the experimental components and the design and other things, but to show you that we were asking people about what type of strategies they would be more, supportive. They would be more supportive. And as you can see, this is regional. This first three is regional level. Last three is national level. As you can see, when it comes to language-related, social, cultural, demands, it is the most risky one, and Turks and Kurds are significantly distinguished from one another, also telling a lot of story about the ongoing process for us. Not only in Turkey, but in Northern Ireland and Colombia, we have similar findings as well. Again, I will not delve into the details of the design, but conjoint experiments were conducted in both countries. In February 2025, April 2025. These are important cases for Turkey, I guess, because these are the cases where some kind of a peace process took place, years passed, and now we need to assess if the process was overall successful or not. And here are some findings. It might be a bit complicated, but we were asking Catholics in Northern Ireland and Protestants in Northern Ireland whether Catholics' rights or Protestant rights were improving over time. Please focus on these two columns. If the numbers here is low, it means that the difference between Catholics and Protestants in terms of assessing the rights about Catholics are minimal. And indeed, it is minimal. But when it comes to the Protestant rights, apparently people do not take it as a win-win case. Catholics believe that their Protestant rights were increasing nicely, but Protestants are not believing it. I mean, showing us that some kind of latent factor still ongoing in there. And if you spend some time in Northern Ireland, talk to the elites and intellectuals of Northern Ireland, we all aware of the fact that Northern Ireland is a ticking bomb. Let's skip this one for the sake of time. This is from Colombia, another descriptive statistics. So on the top, you see the rights, those who put themselves onto the right side of the political spectrum, their assessment about the success of the Colombian peace process. On the bottom, this time, those who are putting themselves on the left side of the spectrum, assessing the success of the Colombian peace process. What do you observe? A big difference, a statistically significant difference between leftists and rightists in Colombia. Apparently, when it comes to rightist people, there are people who think that the process was successful. There are people who think that the process was not successful. So it's pretty, high variation. But when it comes to left side, they are believing that it was very successful. So the agreement itself was very beneficiary. I'm talking about the constituency perspective, very beneficiary from the perspective of the leftists, but not from the perspective of the rightists. And this is why maybe only 2 weeks ago, we observed some offshoots of FARC killed around 27 people as part of this ongoing conflict, supposedly in peace process. So, the summary. Violence is not the only arsenal for non-state armed actors, and if we are conflict scholars, we should focus on the non-violent perspectives in conflict. It is not only a mass, but it's a very lucrative research area, I can say, because the moment you take these as organizations whose primary goal is to survive, then you figure out that there are many strategies, many tactics, many calculations going on. And it's true for the governments as well. They are also acting strategically. They are assessing their rival, trying to understand what's happening, which strategies must be effective. They don't want to engage in costly strategy because it's the right strategy. Probably first they would like to defeat their opponents with military power, policing. But if their power is not enough for that, maybe then they might be engaging in this. If not happening, maybe then sitting around the table. But this strategic component is ongoing, not only cross-sectionally, but longitudinally as well. This is why we need to take a step forward to understand under what circumstances, what type of leaders and governments offer what kind of concessions, to whom, how, when, and eventually what the ramifications are. So I will conclude it here, but since I'm here as part of this lecture series and I was told to talk about my scholarship, my research agenda as well, where it will be going from now on. This is a graph from my ERC application that will be focusing specifically on this topic to assess this strategic component in how governments target constituency, non-state armed group relation. Currently, maybe some of you already saw the ads. Currently, I'm recruiting postdocs and predoctoral researchers. First of all, we will expand this data set, but when we are expanding this data set, we will not do this manually, but we will engage with this generative AI technologies with a combination of natural language processors and large language models. We will not only this time scan 1.5 million articles, but billions of articles in different languages across the world in all time by training the algorithm and fine-tuning. Then we will code this and, end up with a huge data set showing us different features of these strategies. Meanwhile, we will be also focusing on the individual level ramifications by, conducting field research in Turkey, Colombia, India, and Philippines through focus groups, interviews, and experiments to be conducted there. And these things will be methodologically triangulated by expert opinion surveys, by creation of expert pools to begin with in these 4 countries. My dream is that maybe after 5 years, once this project is complete, to enhance this pool into the other countries as well, somehow imitating this electoral studies scholars, like, they have their own manifesto projects, their own, regular surveys across the world. Why not we would have a similar thing that, provide us with, flow of data regularly. And this is the project. So thank you very much for listening.